I want to talk about an aspect of practice that I think we all experience from time to time. And it really is around feeling offended. I don't know. I mean, we've heard people's stories this morning about what's going on, and I don't think I heard very much about this. A lot on aging, sickness, pain, death, um, and and also the beginning of life. And we see those if we're practicing with the three characteristics of impermanence and dukkha and non-self, then we can see it in every stage of life, and we can see it um, in the circumstances that we have, both joyful and painful. But today, because of other things that have been going on, I thought I would talk a little bit about what happens when we feel offended. And of course, the kind of ordinary, worldly, understandable, personal response to feeling offended is likely to be blaming whoever we felt offended by, and maybe whether we only do it in our mind, maybe putting them down or discounting what they have to say, or being dismissive, maybe even developing a grudge or some animosity and holding on to that. And I'm sure that as you're hearing this, and you might be thinking of a time of feeling offended or maybe offending someone else, and recognizing the kinds of habits and patterns and responses that people have that are quite understandable and yet carry a lot of suffering with them. The results of holding a grudge are pretty damaging, really. And the Buddha talked about this in the verses very early on in the Dhammapada, that if we think about, this person hurt me, struck me, assaulted me, robbed me, if you keep thinking like that, then the hatred never ends. You carry that hatred along with you. But if you stop thinking like that, then the hatred goes away. So this idea of blaming what's outside of ourselves, and it doesn't even have to be, even if we think about blaming the circumstances of our life for how we feel. As practitioners, what we want to do is really take responsibility for that feeling for ourselves. This is something I learned in ministry school. It was a 4-year program, and as my class was entering its second year, the teacher said, this is the time when you're going to learn how to take 100% responsibility for your experience. This is one of the most valuable things I think I learned in the whole program. And at first, the mind is like, well, wait a minute, there's a lot of things that are happening that are affecting my experience. People are doing and saying things. There are people who are abusive and mean and all kinds of, like things like this. And but then as I really started to reflect on it, I could understand what the task was. To learn how to take 100% responsibility was really that regardless of whatever is happening, whatever people are doing or whatever circumstances there are, if I really notice that I have the responsibility for how I take that in, how I respond, how I work with my own feelings, then there's some real amazing power in that. First of all, it's really humbling, because when we're blaming, what's outside of ourselves, whether it's other people or the situation, or, I mean, there's so many things in the world to blame because it's just endless. And that's part of what's important to notice about this. There's no end to it. But instead, if we look inside, what we're really finding are the patterns that we have that cause us to suffer. And that we have the ability, the opportunity, once that feeling offended arises, or feeling like the victim, that we have that opportunity to really investigate inside, that we can notice, what's really behind that, take the layers, pull them back, investigate, and use a lot of compassion in doing it. Now, when the word victim happened to come out of my mouth, I wanted to well, wait a minute. There are those times when we also need to really step away from whatever's happening, to not put ourselves in harm's way. And this is also true, very much true. And I remember a time when I was at Wat Pah Nanachat in Thailand, and Ajahn Jayasara was the abbot, and he talked about how when it's easy, you might say, or it's possible that someone could harm us physically. The body's very sensitive and can be easily damaged. But he said mentally, psychologically, he said, no one can harm you unless you participate. And I was really intrigued by that statement, that we somehow have to participate in order for some kind of offense on a mental or psychological level to occur. And this is something I really investigated because, we don't want to take these kinds of statements as truth just because a teacher that we respect highly says it, because then we'll never really know it that way. Instead, we need to really try it out, observe it, to really recognize, that this is where I'm participating, to see that. And when we are participating in it, and we look inside, and we really can trace it to the root of our conditioning that causes this, you might say, sensitivity or vulnerability, something gets unlocked. And I just had another experience of this last week or so. And it can be very hard to see how our feeling offended has any participation coming from our own side. But once we really investigate and we connect to that deep root of conditioning and clear that and recognize it, it also can reveal for us other patterns in our behavior, in our way of speaking, thinking, acting. And then when that breaks open as a practitioner, it gives us a lot of material to work with. Wow. And in fact, it was even connected to this tendency towards perfectionism. And the fact that we were talking about this last week was really helpful in connecting those those patterns, to see what's really going on. And once we see it, it's not like we're just thinking about it and coming to a conclusion. It's not reasoning. So it's more, it's to know, to see and to know, the way the Buddha talked about knowing, direct experience. I can't even really put words to it that will describe it. And anyone who's kind of looked deeply inside themselves, you'll know what I mean. Even without that, I think there's plenty of experiences that we have that we know we can't really describe. Best we can do is words will put a label on it. You can point at it. But when we really experience what's going on, then there's something much more powerful that happens. So that reflection of how do I take 100% responsibility leads us to a lot more compassion, and it opens up our connection to deeper wisdom. I have two people in my life that I think of, the way I see them, I'm close to both of them, and one of them, wisdom really shines through them. Talk about things with them and then there's so much clarity. And the other one, what shines through really is compassion. And when talking to them, could talk to them about the same situation, and what really comes through is the compassion. And we need both when we're dealing with anything in our life, but certainly with this idea of really examining ourselves, or working with situations that are really challenging with other people, really noticing that it's through the wisdom and the compassion that we find the way forward. And it's not just the way forward in the circumstance, but it's the way forward in our awakening. And what I've noticed about these two friends, these two people, is that the one who's so clear has this wisdom capacity. What they're working on is the sensitivity, the feelings, unpacking their childhood trauma and really working through it, and the compassion part blossoming. And the one that shines with the compassion, that person is working on boundaries, working on how do I get clearer about how to, operate in the world. I mean, it just feels to me like such a beautiful example of how we can have these strengths, and that through the practice we develop what rounds us out, not as personalities, but as the Dhamma becomes our whole existence. In thinking about this idea of being offended, this is a very good place to notice where our sensitivities are, where the opportunities are for practice, where the opportunities are for development, where the opportunities are that gives us the chance to look deeper at ourselves. It takes humility, and noticing that when we're blaming other people, and we're, even just mentally kind of putting them down or discounting them or railing against whatever they've said, there's a very strong appearance of the sense of self there. Really defending the sense of self. Ajahn Sumito has a talk entitled, "Who's Offended?" And this is from last year, 2024. And of course, he's talking to his community, because of course this happens in community life all the time. It's like very easy to offend each other because you all come from different backgrounds and have different ways of expressing ourselves. And of course, when you live together with people, there's going to be conflict. But Ajahn Sumedho, he's helping people understand the nature of that inevitability of feeling offended or offending someone, and then really taking that to the ultimate level. Like, who is this that gets offended? And really encouraging everyone to see that we're not these individual personalities, that self-view is where we're held in a kind of artificial limitation that does not reflect the truth of the Dhamma. And that when we pull back, there's one thing that Ajahn Sumedho says in there. He says that the personality is offended, but that awareness that observes the personality is not offended. And we can take that position anytime. And from my experience, when I take that position, like the feeling of, maybe being blamed for something that isn't our fault or whatever is bringing this up. Even if we wouldn't necessarily label it as feeling offended, we could feel hurt. So something that came up last week also. Feel hurt, or maybe we might say we're harmed by something someone else says, but actually we need to participate in that for it to be harm. And then, like I said, knowing my particular way of participating is so valuable because we can see our way, feel our way through that, through our intuitive depths, to really understand how we can let that go and not be harmed in that same way. And to really, recognize that whether someone else intends to harm us or not, that's their karma, that's their problem. If it's something that happened just because we don't understand each other, that's better. Their karma is going to be so much worse if there's an intention to harm, but none of it has to really be a problem for us. If we can start to tease that apart and let go of all of the self-defense, the defensiveness, the resentment, the kind of fighting back, all of that, if we can let go of all of that, or at least set it aside and see it for what it is and look deeper, that's where the real opportunity is for us to awaken maybe bit by bit. Conditioning the mind to look at things in this way can really help us make progress on the path. Because when we're feeling that deep inside, when we're letting go of our, I want to say, like, attention on what's outside, this is where we can really, really develop. It's not just about the instance that we're talking about, the instance at the moment that's coming up. It connects to every aspect, really, of our misunderstanding of reality. I think for the moment, that's probably most of what I had in mind to tell you. I really want to encourage that kind of self-responsibility, and also, of course, following the guidance of the Buddha and um, having those boundaries where they're appropriate, taking care of ourselves. Um, when the Buddha talked about the simile of the saw, he never said we should go to the road where the bandits will be coming to saw your arms and legs off. That's not how it's supposed to work. Really, um, we want to use wisdom and we want to use compassion to understand ourselves and others and grow in the Dhamma. If our primary goal is to awaken, then all good things come from that in our relationships, in our livelihood, and in every way. This is not intended as a promise for some kind of gain, because it's not it, but as a way of really knowing the truth and living accordingly. So I think I'm just going to stop right there. I want to hear what questions and comments you might have. Paula.
This was really an interesting timing and good talk for me. I have had a lot going on this week with a lot of challenges in terms of responding to speech towards me. Kind of a constant barrage because of a situation that's going on. And, I recognized it last night going into meditation and tried to use the handout that you gave us about the three characteristics practice and the reflection under dukkha. Are my thoughts and speech leading to more dukkha or less dukkha? How do you tell? And I took the suggestion to just meditate and then at a certain point bring that question up. So it would be a more of an intuitive kind of direct knowing type of answer.
Yeah.
And what I came to realize was that even though I understood that I was having difficulty responding and staying even keel when these barraging things were coming towards me, and that I wanted to change my speech, I wanted to go a little deeper. And I realized that it wasn't so much what was happening, but I was having an awful, awful feeling of having ill will, and that I didn't want that. And when I tried to figure out, like when you suggest like go to your conditioning, I kind of go to a wall there. I don't really know how that would affect things, but I realizing that that was what was bothering me more than the comments, was sort of an eye opener that that is not what I want. I don't want this ill will. And what is causing the ill will? So then I went a little deeper, and there's an awful lot there. I don't know if I can handle it on my own, but it helped me the next time the barrages kind of comments were coming to not have the ill will, just knowing that it was there. and to kind of, what I really want is to respond with compassion, obviously, um, because this person is suffering, and I'm aware of that. And so, um, yeah, your talk, I'll probably listen to it again. But that's what I have to say
Yeah,
today.
it's really the work you're doing with it, I think is great. I think you might benefit from using the feeding your demons process with that because it gets you out of the logic, which you already were doing, but it's so those questions can help and the
And
visualization.
I don't really know what the demon would be.
You don't have to, you're not supposed to
But I
know.
mean, what am I like, is it,
Work with the feeling. You just work with the
oh,
feeling in the body. So like it's very valuable to identify the ill will, and to recognize you don't want it. That's another layer. That's Vibhava Tanha. That's I want to get rid of this thing. I want to get rid of this thing. This is
oh,
there's attachment there.
yeah.
It's a
Oh,
root
I
of the
hadn't thought of that.
it's a root of the suffering. So you locate that feeling in your body. And then like I for me personally, sometimes I don't need to go, oftentimes I don't need to go through that process of the feeding your demons script. But when things are really hot, sometimes or even, it feels like just some added support in that investigation. You can use that visualization and those questions. So, this feeling in the body, really, really asking questions about it makes the mindfulness stronger. And those questions are just about the feeling. The content is completely set aside, just the feeling. Where is it at? How big is it? What color would it be if it had a color? What is the texture? Is it solid? Is it like a rock? Is it like a sponge? What is it? Is it spiky? You can't ask these questions and you start to get an image of that feeling. And then in feeding your demons, you're inviting the vision of it being a living being. What is it like if it were a being? And then having that being sit across from you and asking it, what do you want from me? What do you need from me? How will you feel when you get what you need? And then taking that being's position, embodying it, feeling it's dukkha, and answering those questions. Those questions come up intuitively. When you get to how it will feel, if it gets what it needs, not only do you know something about what it feels it's needing, but you also know, how it will feel. Will it feel safe? Will it feel loved? Will it feel, it just comes intuitively. It could be anything. And then you take your own position again and you offer that nectar of what that feeling will be. You offer that nectar of safety, that nectar of feeling respected, or that nectar of something, whatever it is, and watch that image change as it becomes satisfied. So this process, and then of course there's the continued process of what that being turns into as an ally for you. This process makes it possible to touch into a deeper level internally. And that deeper level can often reveal things about our childhood trauma, things about, like how we've organized our image, our perception of reality, our perception of ourselves, of our life, in a way that, we're just not seeing the whole picture. we're stuck. So I think that can really be useful. It's, like I've said many times, it's a way of actualizing the first three noble truths.
Mm.
I just had a conversation with someone recently about something in the introduction to a book by someone I respect a great deal, but they were talking about the first three noble truths as doctrine, and then the fourth noble truth as practice. And I don't see it that way. I see the whole thing as practice. We practice with the first three noble truths. We really observe and come to understand the dukkha. And how do we do that? It's to feel the feeling in the body and to really know it from that. How do you know it? How do you come to know it? It can't be through the thinking mind. That's what's, that's where we're at when we're getting the experience of the dukkha, that's where the misunderstanding is. So feeling deeply into it. And then how do we come to understand what's behind it? What's behind the dukkha? So in this case, there's that layer of, in the second noble truth, we see those causes, the desire for sensual experience, some kind of sense pleasure, the kama tanha, the bhava tanha, the desire for becoming, being seen a certain way. This is, the sense of self is what gets offended, for example. And then the vibhava tanha, I want to get rid of this feeling. At one point, Ajahn Sumedho said that he realized that his middle name was Vibhava Tanha, which is, and this is, because we want to be good, we want to be loving, we want to be compassionate, we don't want to be angry and resentful and full of ego and sense of self and puffing ourselves up and all of that. And that wiring is there, and we feel defensive or whatever. And so, looking at those roots, again, if we do this intellectually, we can't make a lot of progress because we can only keep spinning around in what our intellect knows. But the Dhamma is much more vast than that. If we really want to know the Dhamma, we have to let go of that. And deep meditation isn't enough on its own.
Mm.
We have to really investigate. And a lot of times we can do that without even being in meditation at all. But we have to have cultivated this ability to really let the depths of our intuition become accessible.
Thank you. I will put all my other readings aside and bring Feeding the Demons out again and really apply myself. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. If you've read the book and you kind of know what the instructions mean, you can just jump right to the appendix where you've got the format and go for it and journal it. I mean, I found that journaling really helpful because writing down, what the demon looked like, what it said, how things felt. Again, words are only labels, but it's useful to touch into that experience. And then it's also useful to remember the insights that arise, because then we can come back to that. This is why the ally part is helpful, because whatever that demon morphs into, and using the word demon is, it's catchy, but it's like this can be anything. I've had, a small child or one of my favorites was a plush polar bear, or, it could be anything. Plate of Chinese noodles becoming a being, But the ally also can be anything, any living or living representation of something. And when we recognize what that ally represents, it's something that we feel we've missed. Somehow we feel we don't have that or have access to that. But actually, if we're living the Dhamma, we have access to everything. Compassion and kindness and truth and everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sarah?
Thanks, Ayya. You partially just answered my question, maybe. I was interested in hearing you speak to how can one, so let's say you've uncovered some conditioning that's underneath unhealthy patterns or actions in body, mind, or speech that are harmful, causing dukkha, and you can intuitively touch into that in the body. It can, for me at least, be quite a painful experience to be in contact with that. And there's a sense that it's you're kind of at an intersection where change is possible. And yet it may not just unlock like that because it's deeply seated or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I have this sense of a kind of a patient endurance is needed, and different things are needed, but just the realization that this won't change and transform overnight, and how to kind of shore up one's resolve and one's energy and one's motivation to stay with it amidst the continuing flow of triggers and real life situations. And I guess the example of the ally is a good strengthening one. I wondered if you had other thoughts.
Every insight that we experience is also encouragement, even if you think it's a small thing. If we're seeing things differently, then we know that this, and we're seeing things differently, and it's the Dhamma, then that's encouraging, recognizing that we are changing. I think probably one of the greatest encouragements is another human voice. It's like, this is what is said in the suttas about, how do we get right view? It's another human voice is such an important part. So getting that support by talking about it with someone too. And I think sometimes just feeling the challenge, human beings are amazing. If you think about the different ways that we challenge ourselves, climbing mountains and doing all kinds of extreme sports, sailing some little boat across the ocean, or like all kinds of things that personally I think are like, why do that? But this is another, like, this kind of challenge. If we think of it as, like, hey, this challenge, this has the whole expanse of ultimate reality to be explored, to be known. And we are on that path to know it fully. And that we can also remind ourselves how much suffering there is in carrying around this personality, this ego, and seeing from that perspective. And so I think we can find ways to encourage ourselves that, and I'm thinking of, there are two kinds of endurance, really. There's the endurance to stay with the painful feelings, and then the endurance to keep coming back with every trigger. And I think that it's really important to find those ways of encouragement that keep us doing those things. I'm sure there are more. I mean, I find it really exciting to explore the pain, the suffering, to get the glimpses of, why that's happening and what's beyond it. Listening to Ajahn Sumedho's talks and other talks, actually having the support of awakened beings. So seek that out. We can find the encouragement also in the suttas. We can find it in the biographies of people who have experienced deep insight. So, yeah, hopefully something in there will be uplifting and encouraging to just keep coming back to it. I think one thing that's encouraging is when you start to realize that no matter how deep we think all this stuff is, if we're looking at it with the lens of the Dhamma, then we do eventually see through it fully. We don't have to explore everything that ever has happened. We don't have to experience all of our karma. We can start to get the sense of it, and it's like, oh, okay, this is always coming back to this core issue. We can break through this. Yeah. And I'm just excited when people are thinking in this way, are taking these steps. This is, taking the precepts, the refuges, developing faith, developing sila, and so on. There's a lot of progress happened. Thank you, Sarah. Regina.
Yes, there was a part in your talk this morning that really spoke to me, which was sort of the interchange between wisdom and forgiveness. No. Wisdom and compassion. And there are two people in my sort of wider circle of acquaintances that I feel have really wronged me in the past. I don't want to go into detail, but it was pretty influential, life-changing, deep kind of. And occasionally I run into them. And I feel like I've mostly let it go, but when I see this person then right face to face, it comes up again. And I mean, it comes up much milder than it had been in the past. And it's a total process, it's just, But when it comes up, I immediately have this sensation, oh, I don't want to be that way.
Mhm.
I want to work. I do want to do the precepts, and I don't even want to have harsh thoughts anymore and all of that, you know? And so I talk, and at the same time, when I'm sort of face to face, I feel like, oh, I still can't forgive, huh? So when I'm by myself and not threatened and anything, it's all fine, you know? So I talked to a friend of mine and I said, I'm just not able to let go and really forgive. When I see these people, it just all comes up again and certainly milder. And then we were talking a little bit, and eventually she said, you know, maybe it's not about forgiveness, maybe it's about compassion. And that really shifted something in me.
Mhm.
That really, I mean, it made the hugest difference in terms of being able to let go and actually feeling I can do this rather than having to coax myself into forgiveness where I feel like I'm just hitting a wall. And that was sort of that that couple of wisdom and compassion really makes sense to me, you know, and it made sense to me to switch over. I'm not sure if I had wisdom, but it sure made sense to switch to compassion. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Regina. You bring up a few really important points, I think. One is that we can't force ourselves to forgive, like we can't force ourselves to be enlightened. What we can do is put in the causes and conditions for forgiveness. At least this is how I experience forgiveness. To really have that fall away completely is not something we do by a force of will. And one of the ways in which I've found it helpful to be able to turn to compassion, I guess there's two. One that I've already talked about is looking at the way in which I participated so that what this other person said or did could harm me. What was my participation in it? Like sometimes we actually stay in a situation or we go into a situation because of something that is important to us to have in that situation. And so if I willfully went into a situation and I saw the lack of skill that was happening there and I stayed in it, I was participating. And I was participating by allowing whatever this person said to go into my heart rather than like onto my shoulder where I could evaluate it. You know, I'm participating because of the previous conditioning I have to maybe feel bad about myself or something that got connected to there. You know, so reflecting on those, not to blame ourselves either, but to just recognize my own part in it. And not that I provoked them, not that kind of part in it necessarily. I mean, it's less about blaming and more about understanding. And then the compassion is more accessible. In fact, just recognizing that part. And then also the second one is thinking about the good things this person has done, whether towards me or in general, putting some attention on the good, because this is samsara. There's always good and bad. There's always the upside, the downside, the benefits and the drawbacks. Everything I've seen in samsara has this. And so this is something useful to reflect on. You know, this person has some good qualities and they've done some good things, perhaps even for me. And if I put my attention on that, because our tendency is to really accentuate the negative. And it's very down pulling and solidifying in the sense of self. But if we're seeing things in a more balanced way, that's more, like looking at it from the Dhamma perspective, is that we see the dark and the light, the wholesome and the unwholesome. And we're not so caught up in getting rid of the unwholesome and clinging to the wholesome, because even that is still bhavatana, vibhavatana. So yeah, this shift to compassion, I think it's wonderful, Regina. This is the balance. The balance is so important. Thank you. However, yes, Ling?
Yeah, so I think I have two questions, maybe can be one. When you talk about our suffering, it depends on our own participation. What if the person who keep coming to offend you and you couldn't avoid it? And I also found thinking compassionately about this person helped me to kind of lighten this kind of ill will, and why you keep coming back to me, this kind of. But in that situation, my question is, the way I talk to myself is, okay, maybe that's my past karma. I just have to face it. And then I either couldn't, have that boundary, that wisdom. That's my often the situation, and like I try to avoid, but I couldn't avoid it. And I would, I don't want to sound like I was being forced to saying something unskillful or doing something unskillful. But my question was, should I just keep trying, concentrate on my own part, let my sort of this is a karma happening, this person will just continually coming. I already seen this is getting less, but that's still coming, or I should consider differently?
Yeah, it needs more inner work, because it's if it's only words, if they're not physically threatening, then what's needed is more inner work for yourself to understand more deeply why whatever this person says matters to you. To really look at that. This is that idea of going inside to really understand what the hook is. What's the why does it hurt? Why does it bother you? There are billions of people who talk like this person and act like this person, but they don't bother you. And it's not just about staying away from them, it's about understanding your inner wiring. And it's not even trying to trace something, it's really about allowing the mind to really open up to feel it. That's why we want to use something that, like feeding your demons, to ask questions that then are answered from the depths of our intuition, because that's what's revealing more why we're sensitive to this person, why we're sensitive to those words. Maybe it's something that obviously, okay, they're very unskillful and they're saying mean things and anybody would react. Okay, fair enough, but why do I react? Once I understand the Dhamma fully, I won't react. I mean, even if the feeling comes up, then I'll be observing it, not caught up in it. So this is the practitioner, the noble disciple does this work. And so it's in the deeper practice that we can discover what it is about the Dhamma that we're not yet embodying and why. What it is that we feel like we're actually lacking inside. That is really there in total abundance without limit.
For me, not much this person to say the things, the way to offend this person always come to ask me do something which I'm not supposed to do. It's almost like it's convenient. Convenient. I am Chinese. And I have indicated many times, this is not my supposed to do.
Right.
Yeah, and so that kind of feeling like being treated as doormat, I have to do all my best to try to why it's still coming back to me. Obviously, there's a sense of self there, but that's kind of.
I think I wouldn't think it's like the sense of, I wouldn't think about it that way. I would think, okay, there really are in the world important boundaries to have. And the part that we can heal within us that causes us to have challenges around those boundaries and keeping them, that's important work. But knowing that this is about someone continually asking you to do things that basically they shouldn't be asking you to do, is then the work is, how can I really be clear? What am I afraid of that I can't say, no, I'm not going to do that. It's not appropriate for me to do that, and I'm not going to do that. Making it really clear that this is inappropriate. There's a food delivery happening. It's so lovely.
It's a blessing to hear.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So just recognizing that there is something inside, maybe some fear, maybe there's the fear of having more trouble or losing your job or whatever it is, but to really work with that part. So it's like, okay, this is inappropriate for me to have to do this. Yeah, it could very easily be some kind of racial discrimination. This stuff happens all the time in human life. And saying no, but saying no from a place of, yeah, you have compassion for this person. This person is out of line. No. I love you and no. I mean, of course, just, like recognizing that what's appropriate here. What would I think is appropriate here if I were seeing this situation among other people? And stick to it. And then if we're worried about it, look at why we're worried about it. What am I afraid of?
Yeah, a lot of things to work on it. Thank you, Ayya.
You're welcome. Okay, everyone. I think we're going to call it a day. The food has been delivered. Sorry, but just kidding.